family-owned grocery stores and feed stores, two big dime stores. All of that was based around the tobacco industry here in Mullins. And it supported it, and of course my daddy in 1929 he moved to the what they call the McMiller place now, and he was the farm foreman and farmed that farm for years. And then in 1939 we moved back to the home place. Of course, we, at that time, the farmers, the average farmer was about 5 or 10 acres of tobacco. The big landowners had sharecroppers. And David's granddaddy probably had 8 or 10 sharecroppers. And the Danielses and the Buffkins, and everybody had sharecroppers, because the biggest farmer was probably 10 acres at that time. But anyway, everything revolved around the warehouses, and my daddy was a floor foreman at Hardin, and I had an uncle that was a floor manager at Old Brick, and so we've been involved with the tobacco industry all my life. In fact, I was sucking tobacco when I was 5 years old, crawling along under my mom and daddy. But anyway, we were involved in it, and we stayed in the tobacco business for quite a few years, and then we switched over to, left the tobacco business and went totally in the hog business. So anyway, we stayed in the tobacco business till the 80s, and then we got out of the tobacco business. And of course, David and them, they stayed in it longer than I did. So, but that's my time with the tobacco industry. And of course, when I was in high school, I worked for Dixon Metal Oil Company, and we hauled tobacco from the warehouse to the plants. Thomas had 3 flatbed trucks, and we hauled it from the warehouses to the plant during my high school years and my college years. But always been involved with the tobacco industry.
How about each one give your name and spell your name?
Give them your name.
I'm Jim Huggins, and I'm the youngest of 4 sons, and we were raised on the farm on the river. And
I'm Jimmy Huggins. I'm his son. Jimmy.
Huggins.
Huggins.
David Owens, David Owens.
Each one of you are involved in tobacco in one way or another. How about let's start on the right and work our way back to the left. Tell me about your involvement in tobacco.
I grew up on my granddad, uncle's farm, and started probably when I was 5 years old. So been in it since then, and went to Clemson, got a degree, came back to the tobacco farm, and I actually did it till I was 40, and we've been out of tobacco for 10 years now. But it changed, went into contracting, and so we decided. My dad was 70, and I just turned 40, so we kind of got out of the tobacco business.
Grew up, that was all I knew when I was growing up. My grandparents had tobacco, and then my dad had tobacco. Started probably when I was 5 or 6 years old, working in tobacco every summer. And I was kind of in I call it the transition phase of tobacco. My dad, they grew up with mules and small tractors pulling the equipment and stuff, and they had stick barns. And then in the 70s, when I was a teenager, we converted over to the bulk barns, the rack barns. We had racks and a B&O harvester. And then David's generation, they switched over to the combines with the big boxes. I was kind of in that transition phase, and like my dad said, we were staying in the tobacco business till '86, and there was a time in the '80s where farming you either got bigger or you got out, and that was when we decided to get out of the tobacco business, and I went into Dad and I went into the livestock business, just doing hogs and cows and hay.
Let's talk a little bit about when tobacco was harvested, when it went to the warehouse. Which warehouse did your family work with, or did you switch around? What was that process like?
Well, we normally sold at Hardy's warehouse, and then it changed over to Big Three, and then I sold some at Old Brick warehouse. So we kind of varied between warehouses based on space available, is what they'd allow you to sell. Then they got into where you had to designate what warehouse you were going to sell. And so that kind of curtails you in being able to switch warehouses. Otherwise, you had to go into a contract with a warehouse to be able to sell your tobacco. And so that caused some problems. And so like I say, you had to kind of negotiate with the warehouseman and to see if you could sell your tobacco there. It got where it wasn't an open market. You had to deal with the different warehouses, and some of us early back, some farmers, we carried our tobacco to Georgia because it was loose leaf and you didn't have to tie it. So you cut out a labor expense. So a bunch of the farmers would get together and get a tractor trailer load and send it to Georgia. And then, but anyway, then South Carolina finally converted to loose leaf. But again, you had to negotiate with the warehouses. The federal government come out, and you had to really contract with a warehouse to sell your tobacco. And I call it wasn't a free marketplace. You couldn't go from one warehouse to the next. You had to sign up with a warehouse.
In growing tobacco, did technology change the way you grew and would get a crop ready over the years?
The equipment changed. In other words, when my dad was growing up, they were using a hand transplanter. You had somebody walk along with a transplanter, and you had to take water to the transplanter, that type of thing. When I came along, we had a two-row planter on a tractor. You had barrels on the tractor with the water. You had 4 people sitting on the back that were dropping the plants into the machine, and it would set them for you. So, yes, technology changed that. As far as the way you fertilized and that type of thing, I don't think that changed that much. But the way we did it definitely changed based on technology with the equipment that we had to work with.
Any of you or all of you talk about cropping tobacco? What was that like?
I hear my dad talking about it. Like I said, when I came along, we had already changed to automatic harvesters where you have one driver and he crops it. But I remember him saying they start in the morning, and on sand lugs, he'd be on his knees down through the field cropping sand lugs, and you get soaking wet, you know, if you started in the morning. So it was sounded pretty miserable.
It was.
Talk about a day cropping tobacco from your point of view. What was that like?
Cropping tobacco?
Yes, sir.
We'd get up we would start at 7 in the morning, and like David said, you're gonna get soaking wet to start with. And especially the sand lugs, the lower tobacco, you're gonna be bent over all day, so your back's gonna be killing you. That first week was probably the worst, getting back into it and getting your back used to it again. When it's 100 degrees out, those are really bad days. It's so hot, and but it was, you know, it was a way of life. We had neighbors. We all worked together, and usually in the field we'd have 8 people cropping, and you know, it was a lot of hard work, but most time you were with friends doing it. But yes, it was miserable work compared to what it got to be later on when we had better equipment. Cropping tobacco it was tough.
You had, back by the day, you had a mule and a tobacco drag. And it went down the road, and the mule was trained to cropper. You would crop out tobacco, get an armful, and go put it in the drag. And then one of the croppers would tell the mule to get up, and he'd go down and he'd tell him to stop. We'd crop down to the drag. When that drag got full, a drag driver would carry it to the tobacco barn and have to unload it out the drag and put it on the bench where it would be hand strung on the sticks, and then put it in the curing barn. Then later on, as we upgraded, got it left out a 5th middle row, and we would use a tractor with drags, and the tractor would drive down through the field. You had a teenager like Jimmy was probably 5 years old. He'd be driving the tractor, pulling the drags, and then it branched on up to the mechanical harvesters from that.
What?
You're talking about our days. We were in the field at 7 o'clock. We'd work till 12. Take a 2-hour lunch break, come back at 2, you work till 7. And then you might still have some tobacco that you had to hang that night. So it was a long day, and then some days we would get up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, and we'd go unload a barn and take it out the barn and carry it to the pack house so that we would be able to gather the tobacco that day and fill that barn back. So you're talking about long hours and hot days.
Why did your family get out of the tobacco business, and describe what your family does now in farming?
Dad and I got out of the tobacco business. We reached a point in the 80s where at one time we were working 65 acres of tobacco, and the government cut the program 3 years in a row. So we were down to like 35 acres and still trying to do the same payments. And we just decided at that time, you either had to get bigger or get out. And so we decided to get out of the tobacco business, and we went into the livestock business.
David and them planted how many acres, David?
Yeah, we had 200 acres right up until like in the 97. That was one of the years the allotment was one of the highest. And of course in 2002-03, the tobacco buyout came along. So there was no more allotment, no more government program. So there was a 10-year buyout for the farmers. So a lot of people got out when the tobacco buyout came along. And we stayed in it till, well, that was well, 10 years, like I said, 10 years ago, I was in it, so 2012, so we stayed in it 10 years after the tobacco buyout. But one of the main reasons they started contracting, and things changed, so the companies kind of dictated what you had to do, had to do. So I was 40, my dad was 70, and just it's just time to do something else. And we transitioned. I started growing peanuts and soybeans and corn, which we were growing corn and soybeans before, and we started growing peanuts. So that's kind of what I transitioned to.
Anything any of you would like to add to what we've been talking about that maybe we haven't covered?
Well, back to the even 30, 40 years ago, it was a way of life more than it is now. You had cousins, family, we all had lunch together. You know, when he was talking about 2-hour lunch break, you went into my grandmother's house, she had lunch ready, and you went in, all sat down together, rested together. You know, you made, if you had other workers that wasn't family, you made friends, lifelong friends and stuff. So it's just more a way of life. Everybody now is you're in a hurry. You know, you work more land, you're doing more, and you don't get to enjoy it as much as what you did 40 years ago.
That's the thing.
Even though it's hard work.
Yeah, that's the one thing I miss about it is, and my mom was a special person, and there were several women like that in our community. But she cooked lunch, and we'd have 10 or 15 people there for lunch every day.
I worked a lot of teenagers.
Right. We'd work a lot of the local kids that were in the community, and their mom and dads knew they were safe all day. They were there with us, and like David said, I see those people today, and we still have wonderful memories. Yeah, it was a lot of hard work, but heck, we were used to it. It didn't bother us, and we worked a lot, but we had a lot of horseplay going on too. Had good times together, and like David said, we built lifelong friendships that have lasted, that will last forever. It was a way of life, that's for sure, and there's a lot of days I miss it.
I think that covers it. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.